Right, let's make a start, I think. So thank you to everyone for joining us today in our webinar, which is Clearing 2022, Stop the Great Prospective Student Click-Off and Maximise Online Conversion. So today we'll take you through the agenda that's just up there. So we'll introduce Revolution Viewing and who we are. We'll share some real student insights and we'll do an audience poll to get you guys involved. We'll share some student research findings and then we will summarise all those with the clear actions that you can take to drive better conversion during clearing. We'll then introduce you to Vepple, our virtual experience platform, and then we will make some time for some Q&A at the end. In terms of the Q&A, you will see on your right-hand side, there'll be a chat tab. If you click into there, and there'll be a Q&A tab within it. If you put any questions that you've got throughout the session, and then as I say, we'll pick those up at the end. In terms of who's with you today, there's myself, I'm Jen, I'm the Client Services Director at RV, and then there's Craig, who's the Account Director, and then we've got Johnny, who isn't on this slide, but who will be joining us at the end for Q&A, and who is currently, as far as I can see, currently a spinning wheel, but Johnny will be here in flesh virtually to answer any questions you may have at the end of the session. So I'm going to kick off with just a couple of minutes, just sharing a little bit about RV for those of you who aren't familiar with us. So I'm going to start with our mission. So our mission is all about empowering people to make life-changing decisions. But what does that mean? And that means partnering with you guys and doing everything within our power to help you increase the exposure of your fantastic facilities, your courses, your campuses, to the millions of people in the UK and around the world that are in the process of making that life-changing decision to enrol at university. And what do we do? So we were founded in 2004 on the basis of providing 360-degree virtual tours. The idea being capturing an environment and enabling someone to interactively explore online. 17 years on, and we've provided solutions to over 110 universities, solutions such as high quality videos, personalised conversion videos, personalised video builders, our vlog generator platform, 360s, as well as 50 universities that have had a virtual tour from us. Alongside that, we've got a 27-strong university advisory board that is featured of HE marketeers from across the UK. What's changed as we've evolved hasn't been our mission or our passion to help prospective students, but our products have evolved. And with that in mind, we launched Vepple, our virtual experience platform, in March last year. This is the combination of many years of the hard work in HE, which I've touched on, coupled with the bespoke research we commissioned with students to understand exactly what they wanted and needed. We genuinely believe that Vepple is the most effective way in which RV can work with universities to empower prospective students as they make their university choice. And it's a privilege, as we work with each and every one of you, to play such an important part in someone's life. So in terms of this webinar series, is aimed at sharing our knowledge of virtual experiences in online student recruitment and conversion. This particular webinar will focus on getting prospective students to stick, reducing that level of click-off, especially during the period of clearing when we know prospective students are under real pressure and much, much less forgiving. So we're going to kick straight in. I'm going to share a video of a student. We're going to play the first part of it, and then we're going to ask you to take part in a poll and see what you think she said at the end. So to take part in the poll, again, on that right-hand bar that should be running down your screen, you should see poll, and there should be a red dot in front of that. If you click on there, and then once you've listened to this prospective student for the first 10 seconds or so, then you can make your choice.
When I started my search for universities, if they weren't visually appealing and if they didn't have the information I wanted straight.
Right. So that was Sophie. So see if anyone's taken the poll. Right. As yet, I can't see that anyone has. So again, if you can just click on the poll where it says the red dot, yeah, people have started doing it now. That's brilliant. And we will see what Sophie did indeed say.
When I started my search for universities, if they weren't visually appealing and if they didn't have the information I wanted straight there right away, then I would usually just click off it and look at a different university website and pick the ones that were best and easiest to understand and to look around.
So we'll come back and chat through what Sophie says in a second. First, we're just going to see from another couple of students in terms of their experiences and what they found when trying to pick their perfect university.
I get distracted very easily and I don't know where to look or like where to go for a specific bit of information. I get really overwhelmed really easily, and I think because university, like literally, if you go into a website straight away, they have like the whole information about the uni, and then they've got all the tabs about like this is for if you want to find out this bit, and this is for if you want to find out that bit, and it's all there straight away in your face. I think for me personally that's quite overwhelming, because then I'm like, where do I look first?
And then we'll just see from Sophie.
If it wasn't clear on the website what I wanted to, if it wasn't clear what I was looking for and I couldn't find what I was looking for, I would judge a university on that. That is definitely something that I did. Yeah, and that is like the genuine truth. If I couldn't find what I was looking for, I just, because attention span as well, like we were so busy.
Okay, so we heard from a few students there, and obviously you guys completed the poll as well. The vast majority of you were right. So if you would just click off, which was echoed by a lot of the students that we spoke to. So we appreciate it is pretty tough to hear, but I think most of you recognise that anyway from the results of that poll. And the really good news is that's why we've created this webinar series, because we want to help. We want to help with the knowledge and the insights we've got to make your experience stickier so you don't lose those students. So it's good news. And we'll be really positive from here on in, and Craig gets to do the next bit, which is super positive. But in terms of what you will leave with today, will be that view on what students want from a website when deciding what university, especially under the pressures of cleaving. So throughout this presentation, we'll keep referring back to cleaving, that pressure and that time pressure and that stress is absolutely emphasised. Secondly, examples of a good sticky experience to reduce bounce rates. And thirdly, some exciting data to prove that with the right content and user journey, prospective students will stick. And just a slight side point, don't worry, we can count. We do know it should be 1, 2, 3. For whatever reason, Webinar John decided to change our presentation and turn it to 1, 1, 1. So don't worry, we can count to 3. On that, I'm going to hand over to Craig, who, as I said, is going to take you through some more insight, but some really practical solutions to create that better online experience. Thanks.
Thanks, Jen. So just to take this back to the beginning, what we decided to do was we teamed up with a company called Cosmos Engagement back in September 2020. And we thought we'd conduct some research which basically found out what prospective students want from an online experience. And the way that we did this was through 3 different methods. First of all, it was online discussions, it was quick polls, and we also had some online quantitative surveys. Now, the total number of students for this was 64, but the really great thing for you guys listening is the cohort of them is very, very relevant, because 84% of them were from year 13. So these are genuine people who within the next year were going to be looking at going to university and were going through the experience that we were asking. And they were from Scotland and around the England as well. So we asked them, first of all, what it was they were interested in when they were visiting these websites or these experiences. And you can see that there's two standout categories here. There's course information and the student experience. But it should be noted that the student experience was only important to them if it was conducted by actual students themselves. It wouldn't have the same impact if it was an administration staff or academia or lecturer or somebody doing that instead. Underneath there were 4 or 5 other areas that scored quite highly, including things like campus and accommodation. And then you see as the list goes down with some other topics, it becomes less and less popular. I should say at this point that they're allowed to pick multiple things, which is why it adds up to more than 64. So once we had this data, we thought, okay, this is what they're saying they're interested in. Let's now have a look based on our platform and our data, if that matches up with what they're actually clicking on. And generally it did. So this was using our Vepple platform between June and October of last year. Subject and course did come out on top. The student life, which was second on that list, was also high, but accommodation had crept into that top 3 as well. So the first takeaway from this session is, if you're struggling for resource or budget and you're not sure where to focus your attention, these are the 3 areas that we're being told and also can see from our data that are most important to students. So subject and course, accommodation, and student life. So once we had this quantitative information, we thought, let's take another approach and do something qualitative instead. And so we actually sat down remotely and conducted 6 student interviews over a webinar. Now, these students were all first-year students from 6 different universities. So they'd been through the process of trying to select. Some of them had been through clearing, some of them had not. But what we tended to find was actually the answers were very, very similar. The only difference is the student going through clearing is obviously under a lot more pressure. There's more time sensitivity. So everything that we're going to describe is heightened. And the aim of this was to provide insights and ideas and hopefully then build a larger study off the back of it. And we've certainly seen, even though it's a small sample size, some trends already coming out of this. So the larger study will definitely follow at some point in the future. And it should be mentioned that the students who we interviewed conducted their own searches through the pandemic. So they couldn't physically attend open days. It was all done virtually. Now, the way that we tested these students was we said, just talk us through your shortlisting process. Then we're going to provide you with 4 university websites that we want you to play around with, give your feedback and some scores, which you'll see shortly. And then also, can you do the same for one of our Vepple customers, which is Queen's University of Belfast. And what we were told was, generally, whether going through clearing or not, students will tend to go to somewhere like UCAS or the student room as their first point of call. I know the UCAS has a really good section during clearing of places that still have availability. Now, once they'd done that, they'd kind of create a list of potentially 15 universities. And once they had that list, they'd then start to narrow it down. So we asked them to look through the 4 university websites across these 3 different topics. And these 3 that you can see, course, accommodation and city life, are the ones that we were told students were interested in and that were also supported by the data that we had as well. So on the course, they reported that it was easy to find course. So on most websites, it's predominantly there. You either have a search box or a number of drop downs where you can find the thing you're interested in. But you'll notice how they actually graded it 6.5 out of 10 on average. And the reason why it scored lower than you might guess is because they reported having to scroll through pages and pages of text. And all this information was really useful and really important too, but they were frustrated by the lack of visual content, and it became overwhelming, which you heard from Mahanor earlier on in that video. On accommodation, they said, again, this was extremely important for shortlisting, and they'd like to see the photos, the 360s, or a student-led video. They gave the average here as a 5 out of 10 when saying about ease of finding. And remember, this is an average. So for some websites, it was dead easy to find accommodation that was relevant for first year students. In others, they actually never ended up finding it at all. And finally, city life. This was also ranked as very or extremely important, but once again, there's a need for some visual content. And it kind of makes sense because for a student, this is the next step of their lives. When they're moving away from home, they're becoming independent, and they may be moving to a city that they don't know very well. Now, even more so during clearing, they probably won't have the opportunity to visit it. So getting a feel for what it's like to live there and having this visual content is super, super important to them. And unfortunately, this scored the lowest in terms of ease of finding, with just a 4 out of 10. Now, in this situation, we were doing research, so we were encouraging them to keep looking or try again or don't give up. In real life, what we were being told was they would have dropped off very, very quickly in some situations, and that university would have been discounted. So it was quite a worrying piece of information that we obtained. So what we then did was we said, okay, just give us a quick top-line view of how people responsible for university websites could retain your attention and stop you clicking off. So we're going to hear from Ollie now, who will give his guidance.
So to stop me from clicking off, probably just like the Belfast Queens one, have a list, have like a bar list tab thing at the side that just you can easily just click on, that's always there, because I found it also easily, instead of having to keep going back to home and then pressing something, it was just always at the side.
So that was Ollie's guidance, always have information at the side, and I'm actually going to hand back over to Jen, who's going to go into a bit more detail about what this might look like.
Thanks, Craig. So now hopefully you've got a bit of a clearer idea, or had your ideas reinforced in terms of what prospective students want when looking at a university website during their selection process, or certainly what turns them off. We're now going to focus on 3 areas that we know from our research and our data improve the experience that a prospective student has and decreases that level of click off. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is everything in one place. So firstly, we want to acknowledge that university websites have got a huge job to do. It's an absolute one size fits all, as they have to accommodate different audiences from prospective students, existing students, staff, parents, businesses, alumni. It's huge, and that amount of content can make it really overwhelming for a prospective student to quickly find what they're looking for. And we know, and we've heard it today, that they demand a really good user experience, and if they're not finding that, they won't hang around, they'll just click off. And that's heightened during clearing, when there's this absolute sense and reality of the time pressure. So what we've done is we've taken some navigation menus from lots of university websites. Please don't be offended if yours is there. It's nothing to be offended by. It's absolutely not criticism. It's to demonstrate the point of what a university website has to do. There's so much, and there's so much content. And this is a theme that we hear so much from our clients, that a lot of the time it's not actually that there's not content for prospective students, it's that there's so much content and they can't find it. So having it in one place would just make it so much easier for them and make their experience much better, and they'd get so much more out of it and be likely to hang around longer. And what I'm showing here is what does good look like. So Ollie referenced this would be his dream, if you like. So on the left hand side here, we've got an example of Vepple, and we've got all of the areas there that students have said when they're looking for the right university for them, this is absolutely the areas that they want to know about and they want to dig into. So in Vepple, they're clearly listed. They can go around the site, they can keep coming back to this, but it's always there. It doesn't disappear. It's there constantly. And it's that easy reference guide that we know that they want, and that helps them to stick that little bit longer. On that, I'm going to hand back over to Craig, who's going to cover off the next 2 areas.
So the first point here is having interactive content. And so first of all, I'm going to show you what interactive content isn't. And that would be something like this. So again, don't take offense if you recognize this from being on your website. It's actually really useful and it's really informative because it's giving you a list of everything you'd expect to see in your bedroom, in the communal areas, in the bathroom. But my question would be, does this need to be at the forefront of the student's mind? As a freshman, is this really what I'm interested in seeing? The fact that it's got a waste paper bin, a kettle, a mop and bucket. It's useful information, it's good to have, but it's probably not going to be something that's going to confirm whether that student joined your university or not. What would be better would be to have some interactive content, which is just like this. So you can see here, this is what we call a 360, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. It's effectively like you're stood inside that bedroom and you can scroll around and look around and see what's there. Now, you also notice these white circles on the screen as well. These are information points. And within these information points, you can add the text that you saw previously, you can add pictures, and it's basically an option for students to learn more if they wanted to. It doesn't have to be as big as that. You can literally just write 2 or 3 lines in this scenario, which talks about a bedding pack. So it's hidden away from actually seeing the room. And what you can also do is you can have this across a number of different areas. So that was the bedroom. This is the bathroom that it's demonstrating. And we're now going to go to the communal area. But hopefully the student's got a really good idea about what the accommodation looks like based off these. And you can see things like the ironing board, the bin, and the information spot under the sink, which does show the state-of-the-art mop. So things like this, again, could be really important to students, but it just doesn't need to be at the forefront of their minds when they're trying to work out if they want to join this university or not. The second thing to talk about is the personalised experience. So what we mean by this is we're making sure that your university prospective students are seeing only content that's relevant to them. And so, for example, if I have a postgraduate student living in the UK who wants to study history, what they're going to want to see is probably something like, what is the history labs like? What research facilities have I got? What are my career opportunities after I finished? Compare that to a student who lives overseas, an undergraduate, and who's interested in looking at arts, for example. They're going to know a little bit about England as a country. They're going to want to know what the city's like. They're going to want to know how they can study. It's a very different experience. And these experiences can be filtered by a number of different criteria. I've mentioned study level, academic and location there, but you could add things such as stage in the recruitment cycle or even user type as well. And what we've seen from having personalization is really, really exciting statistics, which you can see on your screen now. So again, this was taken from our Vepple platform over a 12-week period between August and November. And we've seen that people are 50% more likely to click on one of the main call to actions if they've experienced personalization, which is a huge uplift. And the majority of our customers on who we're speaking to are saying that that CTA in the main tends to be to come to a physical open day. Certainly now, fingers crossed, the pandemic's behind us. But we also saw 106% longer spent on the site per session on average. So students were really sticking around because the content was relevant to them. And you've probably guessed it, but the longer they stick around, then the better the chance of them committing to a CTA and the better the chance of a conversion at the end. And the other two on there, they were 30 times more likely to consent to email marketing and 36 times more likely to chat to staff and students. So we're really excited from this data that we're seeing so far. So we've gone through a few things that you can do there. I'm going to summarize them all just so that nothing slips through the net. What I should say is we've seen a massive increase in traffic on the day of exam results. It actually went up 149%, and that's taken over the past 4 years of our virtual tour data. So during clearing, this is super important, but I would argue, and certainly our students have suggested the same, that this is relevant despite the time of year. So the first thing that we covered was course pages should at least have attractive photos, but ideally there can be a video, and preferably that's done by an existing student in there as well. Accommodation is also equally as important. It's that visual content that, once again, students are saying they need. And I should point out at this stage that Jen mentioned before, websites have loads of information on them, and the chances are you might have photos and videos already. It's just that the students can't locate them very easily. Now, if that isn't the case, don't worry. Feel free to reach out to us. We can give you some guidance on what these should look like, or even build them for you if that's the route you want to take. Moving on to City, this was very or extremely important, particularly during clearing, as we mentioned before, because the chances are they're not going to be able to visit in person. So they really need to be grabbed and understand what that city's like before committing to moving to a new location. And as you saw on the previous slide, that personalisation is really, really important to grab that prospective student's attention, and it really helps increase the chances of engaging and ultimately converting at the end. So I guess there's 4 parts to this. The first part is the initial experience. So when the student lands on your website or experience, how attached are they to it? Do they feel comfortable? Do they feel at home? Can they find things easily? If the answer to all those things are yes, then the journey or the time they spend on your website is going to increase dramatically. And if that happens, your chances of them clicking on a CTA and ultimately conversion are much, much higher. So what we've seen is if we focus on the above, we'll reduce click off, and we're pretty confident that you'll see those conversion rates that you're after. So I'm going to hand it back over to Jen, and she's going to talk a little bit about Vepple.
Thanks, Craig. So I'm going to spend a few minutes now just introducing you to Vepple. We've referenced it throughout the presentation, but Vepple is absolutely born out of some of the research that we've touched on today. There's more research than what we've obviously been able to share in 30 minutes, alongside our experience of working in higher education and the experience and data that we had from the 50 virtual tours that we've already launched for HE universities across the UK. So how better to shout about how good Vepple is and how well it's really working for prospective students than a student themselves. So we're going to hear from Sophie one last time, and then I'll give you a bit more of an in-depth introduction.
I particularly like the fact that everything you'd need in terms of looking at university is on the left-hand side. So explore the campus, accommodation, my subject, student life, and life in Belfast. And that makes it so much easier, because I just remember as a student in sixth form in college, I spent my time having to look through these websites, and I found this one really simple. And actually, to such an extent that I would have loved to book a campus tour and love to go visit myself, which is great, really.
So that's Sophie, but equally, we also spent a little bit of time in the pilot study we did that Craig's already referenced, asking those same students that looked at the 4 university websites to spend a little bit of time on the Vepple for Queen's Uni of Belfast to see what they thought. And in terms of the average scores that came out of that were considerably higher. So in terms of course and that ease of finding, that was 9 out of 10. If we think about what the average score for the 4 university websites was, that was 6.5. From accommodation, Vepple scored 8.10 versus 5 out of 10. And then for city life, 9.25 out of 10 versus a 4 out of 10. And what that demonstrates is that power of having everything in one place that we've talked about throughout this webinar, but also in terms of Vepple, that personalisation. So in terms of being able to find the course and the course information that's relevant to them, because Vepple is personalised to the choices they've made when they've first gone into their Vepple experience, it's so easy for them to find out what they need about that course because it's delivered to them based on their choices. But what is Vepple? So we need just to give you a little bit more context. Unfortunately, we haven't got time to go into it in any level of detail today, but there'll be some details in a couple of slides. If you want to get in touch, if you want to have a demo, you want to have a chat, then there'll be an email address there, which is hello@revolutionviewing.com. Drop us a note and we'd quite happily talk you through it in more detail and with absolute reference to your university on a one-on-one. But in a whistle-stop tour, Vepple essentially is a combination of lots of rich content sources to really create a personalised, sticky experience for a prospective student. So guided tours, 360s, videos, online events, Q&A, chat integration, maps, and lots more brought together into that one seamless, really responsive experience. And the benefit of Vepple being a shared platform is that the financial burden of building and maintaining the application is shared, because there's a community, there's the Vepple community, there's lots of people that are on this platform. One organisation, that's us, can drive innovation, and that innovation is based on data from prospective students around the world that we can then really easily identify the trends and know what prospective student wants, which hopefully we've started to demonstrate. That's a huge passion of ours, and research and data is something that's absolutely in the lifeblood of RV and really important to us. Also, we get shared learnings across the Vepple community with that benchmarking versus an average from other universities. So if you're a Vepple client, you can see how everyone else on the platform has performance from a benchmark perspective and how you are either up or down from that, and then we can help you to get where you want and need to be. In terms of Vepple, right now we have 14 clients. We have 10 who are now live. They've just gone live in the last couple of days. So again, that learning and that data just grows and grows week on week, month on month, as more and more people go live. And what does that look like? So in terms of the data, we've just taken a really small sample in terms of the amount of breadth of data we've got, just to demonstrate how hard Vepple is working for our clients. So in terms of average session duration, Vepple enjoys that over 11 minutes versus an average university website, of around 3 minutes. Average pages per session, nearly at 9 there, versus an average university website of around 3. And then bounce rate, which is really important, especially at clearing. Remember, we want people to really stick and see us through to that final decision. With Vepple, we're enjoying bounce rates at around 17% versus a typical university website of around 40. And on that, it's time for us to stop talking for a second and Johnny to come back in the room, hopefully, technology all being well, and take any questions from yourselves, which I think Johnny's been looking at and seeing in the background.
Yeah, hi everyone. If you have any questions, please do put them in the chat on the right-hand side. There's none come through yet, so we'll give it a couple of seconds in case anyone has any, but please do reach out. Just to say as well, that it's on the screen, but if anyone has any follow-up questions or wants to book a demo, please do email us on hello@revolutionview.com and we'll come back to you.
Johnny, can I ask you a question that we get asked in every single Vepple demo that we ever do?
Yeah, go for it.
So we always get asked, is Vepple completely separate to my website, and will I be driving traffic away?
Yeah, it's a really fair question, and the answer is no. It's very much an integrated part of your website. So it sits on your website, on a subdomain of your website, and we're building as we speak integrations with it that mean that not only can you have a big banner on the homepage, which is what Queens do, for example, linking straight through to it, but there's actually tight integrations across the site. So when you're on the accommodation page, you actually see accommodation 360s. When you're on the chemistry page, you actually see the chemistry guided tour that's within Vepple. So it's all about bringing it together to form one experience. And from what we've seen from chatting to students and prospective students about what they want, they've very much said that actually to them, they don't really care. They don't see it as a separate thing. It's just, it is the university and how they get to it and things like that. As long as they're getting the information that they find helpful quickly, That's the important thing. So no, it can be a standalone thing, but it can also be, and we would kind of encourage you to very much weave the two together.
I'm going to throw it at you, Johnny, that I hear a lot from my customers as well. So this would be how easy to get going, because sometimes people are concerned about resources and time. So can you just talk through how we'd handle that?
Yeah, I mean, it does depend on the university to some extent, but we've for the ones that we've been getting live so far, the quickest uni from the point of onboarding was live in just shy of 6 weeks. Sorry, my headphones just muted. Very much in time for clearing if needs be. But then, you know, other universities, maybe if they've got more content, want to take a slightly different approach to it. But either way, we can help you with onboarding and kind of population on your behalf. So we've got a variety of bolt-ons where we can, you know, migrate content for you and even do the full population service for you if needs be, to get something live more quickly.
Thanks.
Right. Can't see any more questions have come in. So if there isn't any, just giving everyone a final second, then we will thank you for your time. We'll follow up with everyone that's attended. And if you want a copy of this webinar, then of course you can. Just let us know when we drop you a note and we can send it on to you. But until then, thank you very much for listening to us. And of course, as we've all said, any questions, then please drop us a note at hello@revolutionviewing.com. Thanks, guys.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.